Okay, here we go. Audio is way down low. I am uncertain as to what's going on. Actually, I don't even know where within the laptop my mic is specifically. So as long as you guys can hear me, if you have to turn the volume up, that's unpreferable, but that's still fine. I don't know why it's acting so suppressed at the moment. Mute myself. Edit video. We can go in and set everything up properly. Live, monetization on. I'd like to earn $3 from this. That would be nice. Oops, no, that's the wrong thing. What was I supposed to do? Control room, that's it. Audio is. Are you saying that generally, or are you saying I sound weird? Or am I quiet? Because it's audio. Yeah, it's really. I don't know why. It's acting suppressed. I mean, I can't, like, actually do settings, I think. I don't know if I can actually do that, like, in the middle of the stream, if that suddenly would mess with things. Okay, mic, audio. Oh, well, I guess I could just do this. Does that do anything? Or do I have to hit enter? I hit enter. Okay, that boosted it a bit. Tell me if that's a bit different, or if that's better enough. And if it's not, I'll try cranking it some more. It looks like I actually can adjust it in the middle of the stream. I thought it would, like, freak out and close the program or something. I didn't change the settings at all like before this, so I have no idea why it's doing this. All right, let's get Google Earth open at least. +5. Okay. Is it advanced? Crank, crank, crank. Audio, audio, audio. Did that? It doesn't look like it changed, at least on my end. I mean, it would be nice if I could just click this here. I don't know. Uh, let's try 7. Audio, audio. Looks like it moved a bit. All right, that's a bit better. Okay. Get off my screen. All right, fine. Let's get obnoxious. Let's do 11. How about that? Audio, 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 audio. Oh crap. You said that while I had it set at 7. Okay, I'm gonna go back down to 9. Oh no, 911. Okay. We're gonna call that a middle ground. And looks like I already lost people from not having the audio set up. Okay. Got Google Earth up. And let's get some more things up because I need my laptop to start cranking out some heat because I have 2 sticks of butter set up under the heat exhaust. I'm trying to dual purpose energy, use my laptop heat exhaust to warm and soften up the butter so I can use it to make chocolate chip cookies later. But doesn't seem like my laptop's, like, putting out as much as I would like. So give me 1 second. I'm going to lift it up, move some stuff over and out of the way so I can have it set lower, sitting lower over the sticks of butter. All right, I think that's as close as I can safely get it. I don't want the butter literally touching the laptop. Okay, we'll see how this goes. I don't know, hopefully, maybe if I move the Earth around in Google Earth, that'll warm it up. Come on, start complaining, computer. My bit rate is not 0. Is this audio okay? Let me know if you guys want me to turn it up a bit louder. Okay. Uh, oh crap! I forgot to give the usual warning at the beginning for anyone who's watching the video afterwards. Sorry you listened to that for the first 5 minutes. You can skip another like 5 minutes before I actually start things officially. But yeah, so we'll start at we're about 4 minutes as per usual. There's the band list of stuff. And there are things adjacent to those that will also get you banned. And we only do perma bans on this channel. You do not get timeouts. If I know for a fact, or if I'm reasonably confident that I've never seen you before, and it's the first time you do something, then I'll like warn you. But if you then proceed to knowingly do stuff, then you'll just get banned. And there are only perma bans. But that's also not that most of the people who get banned from Josh's Twitch stream are human either. They're mostly bots, but that's also how I roll in Josh's Twitch stream chat. Permabans are the only ban. Okay, I have the notepad with me, or at least the note sheet, and it is only full words and phrases for the most part. It is I learned that lesson last time. Okay, we're not doing acronyms anymore, so you're not going to hear me suddenly freeze staring at like a bullet point I listed under a specific country or topic, and then after like 20 seconds of silence, hear me go, I forgot what this abbreviation was supposed to mean. So we're not going to do that anymore. I learned that lesson. And wait, let's check with you guys. Yes, yes. Well, volume is low. Oh, it's still low. Okay. Let's go to the other side of 9/11. Let's go to the 11. How about this? Is that better? I know, I think my delay with you guys is usually 12 seconds or 20 seconds, which is why I can't do the actual, cool streamer thing of like fully interacting with chat in real time. Because, people who have very little delay, like Josh, who has a fancy gamer computer, only have to deal with like 5 or 7 second delays. Ironically, except when he's dealing with me, but and I'm supposed to be his mod, but I have internet issues, so when I am trying to talk to him in his chat, it usually ends up being like a 20 or 30 second delay between us. But that problem's on my end, not his. All right, and seems like the butter is receiving the laptop's heat. Okay. All right, I'll talk about a few things. Then I'm gonna test it again. I might want to. Oh, wait. I can do this. Hold on. I figured it out. I just had to flip the plate over and then put the butter on top of the plate so that it's like the plate's like a booster pedestal thing, so it's closer to the heat exhaust. Okay, this will work. I'm repurposing energy so I don't have to use like other energy that would be excess energy to heat the butter up some other way. I'm dual purposing. Okay, so that should be it. Oh, in just about 10 minutes. Perfect. Okay. Let's also get one other thing up just for the sake of it. Yeah, throw the price things up unless it's going to be skanky women. Nope, just shoes and tools and Matchbox car toys. All right, those are fine for ads. And what do we have here? We have oil prices just refusing to care about reality. Like, this is getting into hardcore denialism. Because as of the most recent numbers, flip the page over here, global oil production at present is not because of uh, once including the OPEC production cuts and everything. So it would not otherwise be this low, but including the OPEC production cuts and all else, global oil production currently is at 100.9 million barrels per day. It's fallen a decent bit over the last week or two, whereas previously for the last couple months it was about 101.5. Whereas global oil demand has not really fallen like it normally would in the winter. And a decent chunk of that is on Iran's part, actually, that we'll talk about in a second, and that you'll hear about in the OPEC oil production levels video once I post it. But global oil demand is actually, instead of going down like it normally would in the winter, it's staying at about 103. And in fact, came in at 103.3 million barrels per day, which is the new record high it set towards the end of last year and is still staying at. So that is over a 2 million barrel per day physical supply deficit on the market, which is causing inventory drawdowns. But, you know, the market, which again is not some sentient entity, it's composed of human beings making bets and making investment decisions, and human beings are inherently all stupid. And thus, the market itself is not some smart thing, it's also inherently stupid. So it's ignoring reality. And also, this situation here, which seemed to kind of stagnate for like a couple months after we thought it was going to flare up, but then it didn't, has now been starting to actually go places and get worse. So now, you have that risk factor as well. China is setting new record demand highs. Their refineries, several times over the last number of weeks, have been maxed out, cranking out as much petroleum products as possible, which is a signal that, demand is not dropping like the, economic forum or whatever it is constantly kept expecting it to. Because although China's population has, leveled off and is now starting to decline, uh, remember that, you know, that's still about 1.4 billion people, and everyone like that wants to brag about China, talks about how amazing it is that they lifted, 700 or probably now 800 million people out of you know, previous era and up to first world living standards. If you do some basic math, that still leaves another like 600 million people that haven't yet, that are either still in like third world conditions or at least part of the way somewhere in like second world conditions. So, that still is a huge chunk of modernizing population left, which, is going to create oil demand with it until this whole event happens, of course, and that causes China's economy to have some internal issues because of the external fallout of all that. But also, Libya output is down from 1.24 million barrels per day down to somewhere between 850 and 900,000 barrels per day because of protests across the country that have closed several oil fields. And also, not as big of a factor, but some output in Ecuador is down, having to do with all that chaos going on there. That's dropped them by about 70,000 or so. So not a gargantuan amount like on the global scale, and also temporarily for the last week or two, and for the next week or two, probably a bit of U.S. output is down. Uh, a couple or a few 100,000, I think somewhere between 300 and 600,000 fluctuating barrels per day is offline up in the Bakken region. So all that factored in at the moment, global oil supply is currently at 100.9, whereas demand is at 103.3, which is obviously, a 2.4 million barrel per day physical deficit. There already was for several months, for most of the second half of last year, a 1.5 million barrel per day deficit. But uh, the market was largely choosing to ignore that for the most part. They kind of acknowledged it here. Uh, then they acknowledged it some more, but then just gave up. Then the Middle East stuff happened, and they were like, "Ooh, that's interesting." But then they just went into this whole denialism situation again. So that is where all of that is sitting, as of the moment at least. And actually, oil demand is going to gradually pick back up a bit because, or an extra bit, anyways, because a whole lot of shipping companies are now diverting their cargo away from the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden area and just going all the way down around Africa and then on to either the Americas or up to Europe. So that is adding and is going to continue to add as long as that situation carries on for an additional bump up in oil demand in the form of marine fuel oil, as well as some companies have decided to start switching a lot of stuff over to air freight instead of sea freight because the extra week or two of going down and all the way around Africa would be too much for them in terms of time frames. So they're willing to pay the extra shipping price to send it faster via air freight. However, the issue with that is the same very reason of why air freight has only predominantly been used by things that are really expensive and thus can afford the inefficiency and or things that need to get somewhere really fast like pharmaceutical products because air freight is not anywhere near as efficient as sea freight because with sea freight you can pack 20,000 shipping containers of stuff on a vessel and it will burn about 10,000 or 20,000 barrels of fuel transporting it for the course of a month from one end of the world to the other. You can put 10,000 or 20,000 more containers on that vessel, and it will still basically burn close to the same amount of fuel. It'll burn a little more, like 20% more, because once you're at a certain point, when dealing with huge volumes of mass and when dealing with water and hydrodynamic physics, it doesn't really affect it that much anymore. Whereas in air freight, if you use some of the largest transports like a 747 freighter or a 777 freighter, then you can ship the equivalent of 20 shipping containers on a single flight for around 1,000 barrels of fuel. So, for the same 20,000 barrels of fuel, that's a massive ship will carry 20,000 containers across the ocean. For that same 20,000 barrels of fuel in air freight, you would be able to transport about 400, maybe 500 shipping container equivalents of freight. So that's why air freight is, kind of only used by stuff that needs to get somewhere really fast, like pharmaceutical products and stuff that's really expensive, but and or is also wanted really fast, not necessarily needed, like electronics products. For example, iPhones typically get shipped in air freight because millennials and Gen Z will drop dead if they don't get the newest iPhone on time. So, uh, oil demand is going to be going up even further, not just from regular growth that would otherwise be happening this year. Meanwhile, supply is going to be having some issues initially. Some of it will get balanced out by large additions in Brazil, the US, and Canada later on. But the oil market is still just doing denialism and just doesn't want to hear it. I'm not sure I'm not sure why they're so desperate to stuff cotton into their ears. Okay, I can hear you fine. Hi. Okay, so nothing new from chat at least. My bit rate is fine. So YouTube was lying, as it always does. All right, where to start? Uh, well, since we're talking about oil, let's start with OPEC, with the slow disintegration of OPEC, actually. You know, that thing I made a video about. If you just go to the videos on the channel, that's one of like the most recent ones. So there, Angola down in southern Africa just left OPEC. For those who weren't aware of that, still, I was not expecting them to leave. They were kind of off my radar. I was slash still am obviously heavily expecting Iraq to leave and potentially even the UAE. Those two sometime within the next 10 years. Because OPEC is actually what people typically like mock it for being. It is basically a cartel with Saudi Arabia as the cartel boss. As it, there's no real like necessarily voting thing that goes on. It kind of is just Saudi Arabia issues orders, and they want to basically maintain perpetual eternal production cuts from now on, partially to get the world normalized to only seeing 9 million barrels per day out of them or less, since they're approaching within 8 years or so the end of their plateau capability. Now, a lot of the others could hold their plateaus for longer than Saudi Arabia could, and Iraq is one of the longest because they have so much left and about just as much undiscovered because around 40% of their territory has never actually been explored because the country's, been in and out of chaos for decades and wars and everything. So Iraq, especially because they're still in like second world status, like lower second world, middle second world, and are, they want to economically rise. They don't want to stay in that position. So they would like to be able to actually boost up their oil production to what levels they're actually capable of, as opposed to being told, ordered like they're some kind of dog to just stay wherever they're told to. So uh, that's this is their production history. You can see a pattern here based on their various decisions they've made, which were not theirs, they were Saddam's decisions. But, the stack of unreliability was the ultimate decision as to why the US actually did the whole 2003 invasion. And then they started coming up like this. Zoom in a bit more here. And here, post price collapse, they were told to stop, and they listened. They obeyed the Saudi orders. And as the years went by, the prices recovered over the later 2010s. They started getting really tired of it, and they were going to start disobeying. However, then 2020 happened, so they participated in those production cuts. But they were supposed to go all the way down to 3.5 and stay there, but they didn't really listen. They stayed up in the upper threes instead. And then they kind of just went their own way and started going back up and went up to around here. But then here we had the Kurdish Turkish disputes, which caused a production drop from some of those fields being shut down. Then here we have the new oil production cuts that started, and they played their part. They were supposed to hold at about 4 million barrels per day, but then they decided after just a few months that they weren't really going to do that anymore. So now they went back up to 4.3. Then they were told to cut down by 200,000 barrels per day from the 4 million barrels per day, so down to 3.8, which they didn't. They went down to 4.1. And when this updates, you'll be able to see actually they have now, as of the most recent OPEC data, gone back up to 4.3. So they're not even pretending to comply by different means anymore. And Minus that Kurdish stuff, they should, if they go all the way back up, be able to get back up to 4.4 or 4.5. If the negotiations between Kurdistan and the Turkish like companies that run the port that exports the stuff, if those actually go through, then that stuff will come back online and they'll be able to go up to about 4.8 or 4.9. And then in 2025 is when a massive expansion project at one of their fields down in the Basra region that has been held back by the fact that it literally doesn't have enough wells and pipelines on it to actually get oil out from it at the rates that it could. It's only at about half capacity. So that drilling of the additional wells and construction of the additional pipeline network is ongoing and will be completed next year in 2025. And so that field will jump up to double, which will put them up by another 400,000. So from their 4.8 or 4.9, if they go all the way back up to that, that will next year see them jump up to 5.3 million barrels per day, of which they almost certainly are going to do because, like I said, they're not listening to whatever they call themselves, the House of Al Saud or something. They're not listening anymore. Neither is the UAE actually, because the UAE wanted to go up to a plateau of 4 million barrels per day, which they did for a couple months before 2020 happened. They played their part in the production cuts, but then started going back up over 3. And then they listened reluctantly to the new production cut orders last year and went down to 2.9. But now they've been ordered to cut back by another 200,000 barrels per day down to 2.7. However, as the data came in, actually, we can go. I think theirs is officially updated. Did it? The December data? Yes, it did. So they are not listening. They're just staying at 2.9. They're not increasing, but they're not obeying the new orders to go down by an extra 200,000 barrels per day. So UAE is also kind of done, though they're not being as flippantly disobedient as Iraq is. So Iraq is like, at least I feel, the most likely to leave. Or if OPEC can, I don't know, maybe even get kicked out or something for, disobedience, quote unquote, if that actually is a thing that OPEC can do. But that is their whole situation and arrangement at the moment. And then from there, we will get into Iran, both the geopolitical, like military stuff, and also at first, their oil and gas infrastructure issues, because those have really accelerated over the last 2 months to actually now dangerous levels. See if anybody said anything. No. Okay. At least that was all right. That was last thing I heard. So no, nothing new. So Iran is both a oil and gas producer, and since the sanctions were removed and they can export oil again, they wanted to, obviously bring their production back up to regular levels. They were only allowed to do 2.5 for a little bit. However, now there's effectively no restrictions on them anymore. So they were going up to their former 4 million barrel per day plateau. As you can see, that was their rough norm there. And they were heading up there after the 2.5 level was removed. However, they've run into an issue now. They can't really crank it any further. And that is partially because a lot of their oil production, some of that upper 25%, is dependent on gas reinjection into some of their older fields. Here, let me look up I don't know, pictograph or something for you guys, just in case you're not familiar. Oil field gas reinjection. Uh, that's with CO2, but they're well, actually, okay, they might be burning the gas to get CO2 to then use. But if they're being really inefficient, like they likely are, they're probably just using the gas itself. But uh, yeah, so reinjection, you usually use water or CO2, assuming you're being efficient. Um, Ways of being inefficient are just using the gas itself or just burning the gas right then and there on site and using the CO2 from burning the gas right then and there on site to inject. Is there a bigger one? Uh, okay, that's how Canada does the steam lifting stuff. Is there a regular bigger one? Why are these all small? I want a large one. Maybe. Will this work out? Yeah, okay. So, you can do water, you can do CO2, or some kind of gas at least. So, a lot of their stuff is dependent on injecting. Oh, okay. Well, never mind. There you go. There you get it. Gas lift. So, a separator. Separate the oil and the gas, re-inject the gas. Okay, there you go. So yeah, re-inject the gas or burn it to get CO2, re-inject the CO2, or get CO2 from another source and inject the CO2. Or like Saudi Arabia does, uh, you know, suck millions of gallons of salt water out of the Persian Gulf each year. Uh, you know, Not really caring to the various damage levels that you're doing to some of the local ecosystems there, and just dumping all of that down to the oil fields. But Iran relies on reinjected gas to add false pressure so that they can keep like oil flow rates normal, and they're running into an issue. That issue is because of the fact that their gas infrastructure is starting to buckle for various reasons, one of which is really poor maintenance, and that is coming on the parts of corruption internally that just like South Africa, just like Nigeria, government officials just sort of funneling a lot of the profits and revenue away to their own accounts, where as a whistleblower inside Iran who was arrested for doing the whistleblowing, of course, said that there's a there's a mysterious gap. There's a discrepancy between what their oil and gas revenue should have been in 2023 versus what the government actually supposedly got from it and spent, and that discrepancy was on the order of I think he said $26 billion. So, the at least in 2023, 26 billion of their oil and gas revenue was just sort of disappeared, just ceased to exist for all we know. Who really knows what became of it? But it just went away somewhere, retired, and that obviously is a huge deficit in constant maintenance, re-upkeep, equipment purchases. Plus, also, Iran is kind of blockaded from getting a lot of stuff. They previously got most of their stuff through Russia, since Russia previously was allowed to get a lot of stuff. But for the last 2 years, for obvious reasons, Russia hasn't really been able to get that much stuff. They do get stuff from China, obviously, Russia does. However, the Chinese stuff isn't the best quality. And even with what it gets, it's not enough. So Russia has to choose between Russia or Iran. And Russia kind of chooses Russia, obviously. I would hope that would be obvious. So Iran's stuff is degrading, and they, minus that new addition from the Pars gas field, which they supposedly brought online last year, which should have bumped them up to 35 billion cubic feet per day. That's now being called into question whether that actually happened. Other than that, they were at either 28 or 29 billion cubic feet per day, and their domestic consumption was around 24 billion cubic feet per day. And the remainder they exported gas wise largely to Iraq. However, over the latter half of 2023, Iraq reported that the levels they received from Iran started falling, and as of the end of the year, they were in deficits, as in they weren't receiving it anymore. So that implies that there's no surplus. So Iran's gas production, whether it was up to 35 or whether it was still just at 28 or 29 billion cubic feet per day, has to have fallen down to, or at least has to have fallen below or down to at least the 24 billion cubic feet per day that they domestically consume. However, okay, I'm raising my finger, but I don't have a camera because I'm not a real streamer. However, there's more. We have a Billy Mays moment here. So, did I have this one bookmarked? I think it would be a few days back because a lot of this is going to be about the strikes and the Pakistan stuff. How far how far back was it? I think it was a few days back. Oh yeah, and Azerbaijan's leader Aliyev started schizo posting, so we'll get to that too because that's fun. Uh, oh yeah, and Iran is losing it and is bringing its inevitable war with Azerbaijan and Turkey closer because they've started mass arresting Azeris because they're draining they're draining the larger lakes up in the Azeri portions of Iran to provide water for like the Iranian portions of Iran, because racism is always fun. So they're now facing large protests from their Azeri citizenry, to which they're responding with, mass arrests and suppression. Because what else are they going to respond with? Was this really that far back? All right, this might have been like over a week ago. Okay, that's the bombing stuff. All right, I got rid of one issue, but I might have run into another about not remembering where stuff is. Security forces, blah blah blah. Or I might have just been stupid and not actually bookmarked it. The inflation rate soaring, yeah, we already talked about that. Uh, Dan, where was that? Okay, I probably just ended up not bookmarking it. Okay, I will hunt for that and make sure I actually bring that up in the next stream, just so I can show you, like, prove to you that it was real. But they have had to switch like two or three of their power plants because they predominantly produce power from natural gas. They've had to switch two or three of their power plants over or not switch them over. They've had to switch on alternative power plants to burning fuel oil instead of natural gas, which, kind of implies that they're actually not producing 24 billion cubic feet per day of gas, because if they were doing that, they would be able to supply those, two to three additional power plants. So their actual natural gas demand is probably a bit lower right now, something like 22 billion cubic feet per day, maybe, which they're apparently either just able to meet or not even meet, because they clearly also are having gas supply issues with uh, you know, their gas lifting of their oil fields because they're not really being able to like push it up all that much higher. Because here's where 2023 would start. That's 2022. Here's 2023. Go through the first half of 2023 and start hitting the second half here, and it starts curving out. So they're having a interesting breakdown of stuff in there. And also, the Balochistan uprising has kind of begun. The whole separatist clashes, and now they're about to trigger the same kind of reaction from their Azeri population with all the mass arrests of Azeri protesters. protesting the fact that Iran is just draining these giant lakes up here because Iran itself in total is in drought and it needs to get the water from somewhere. So how else to solve that problem by just depriving one of your minority groups of their water supply, because that always ends well. So in every way it can, Iran is like absolutely doubling and tripling down on its own kind of like internal self-destruction. And then on top of that, uh, I had said up to this point that Iran was like kind of tactically smart in terms of like how it engages and stuff outside. Well, it turns out, uh, nope, they decided to get rid of that as well, as they launched several ballistic missiles themselves this time, not a proxy. They launched several ballistic missiles themselves at Kurdish targets in northern Iraq. They insisted they were ISIS targets. They weren't. They were just Kurdish dudes. And also fired near several U.S. consulate buildings, which was wise. Okay. Now, also, they fired some at Pakistan to kill some random Balochistan dudes. Even though there's plenty of, Balochistan separatists in Iran, they could fight. They have been. There have been numerous firefights between the Revolutionary Guard and Balochistan separatists down there. And so Iran or Pakistan, in response, sent several jets into Iran and actually flew over like 50 kilometers beyond the border into Iran and bombed some places in Iran, mainly targeting Balochistan dudes. So Iran has decided they want to like actually start pushing outside of the envelope that was, otherwise really clearly stamped. It was a pretty clear envelope of you can do XYZ and get away with it. But instead of continuing to do that, from which they could have honestly like pulled off a lot of stuff, they decided they want to step outside of the envelope because I guess like everybody just wants to die for some reason. That seems to be the mood of the entire world at the moment. So they're gonna, I guess they are actually gonna start pushing and try to push and push stuff until they eventually tip things onto them being on the receiving end of an actual like US retaliation. And ammo for that is starting to be put forth now with people giving testaments to the government, to congressional committees and stuff about how Iran like is totally right on the verge of having nuclear bombs. They could make one in like just a week. Ironically, I've been of the stance that Iran probably already actually has nukes because North Korea was like way, way further behind, and they managed to get nukes in like the 90s. Uh, whereas Iran is like not North Korea. Iran's more functional than that, and Iran actually has more access to resources than North Korea does. So I would honestly think Iran probably already does have nukes, at least a few like small ones. Granted, at least I would suspect they wouldn't actually use them in terms of like lobbing them at Israel because they would want to hold on to them for the inevitable, what they see as an inevitable like U.S. invasion that they're paranoid about. Although the U.S., no matter how far things like go, the U.S. is really unlikely to actually invade Iran. What's would be the most likely inevitable like end of Iran provocating stuff would just be a mass like airstrike and cruise missile campaign, starting with the stealth stuff, starting with the B-2s and the F-35s, and once everything that could like detect the regular aircraft and detect the regular incoming cruise missiles was down, then all the like mass number stuff would start from F-15s and F-18s and F-16s, and some tornadoes, some typhoons, some rafales, because the UK and France would play a bit of a part, and some more 18s from Australia because the Aussies always show up, and then also just like hundreds of tomahawks. But at what point that will come, I'm not certain. Maybe it'll happen this year because everything is happening this year. I mean, that's the title of the stream, anyways. Everybody is quite literally just like cruise miss or is what was the term? Speed running. Everybody is just like speed running everything. Quite literally speed running like absolutely everything. And then we'll do Yemen stuff in a second. First, let me check chat. One tab is a mate. But I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know what one tab is. Whoa, 29. That is the most people we've ever had in a stream. Okay, so I'm assuming a bunch of people showed up like well into this. You can scroll back in time on the stream, like you can actually literally go backwards because we've already been covering stuff for about 35 minutes. So go back to around the 10-minute point. That's when we really started. I have no idea what you're referring to with the one tab thing, by the way. Saudi Arabia, uh, no, they're the saltwater injection for the oil fields in Saudi Arabia is not an issue for them because most of their population lives here and here, and most of their oil fields are here and up through here and offshore as well. So, and Riyadh gets a large part of its water piped over from desalination plants on the coast. So Riyadh would be the closest if there was an aquifer over here. They'd be the ones at risk for salination contamination, but they're not, as most of the population lives over here along the coast, and they have, in large part, depleted a huge chunk of their groundwater, as it was ancient groundwater back from when it actually rained in Saudi Arabia. So they are also, in large part, reliant on desalination plants now. So there isn't really any like groundwater aquifer to contaminate anymore because they used it all. Okay, what was next? Oh yeah, Yemen. So after the initial one, the US and the UK have carried out additional strikes in Yemen. Basically, kind of what you would expect, sort of waiting for the Houthis to like poke their heads up again, because when you, at least especially for the larger ones, the ballistic missiles, those aren't like those aren't something you like stuff in an apartment room, you know, throw on your shoulder and run out real quick and just like heave it into the air. Those are big. They weigh like multiple tons. You have to drive them on big trucks. You have to put together this whole setup to launch them. So that takes a while. And in that while that it takes, we kind of see that with our surveillance stuff really quick and have been blowing it up whenever it surfaces itself. So we've been doing that, and we'll also hit a few more of their storage points. One of which, uh, one of the recent ones here, yeah, this one you can really see. This was not a singular explosion. This was a fire that kept going and was burning in a really bright ball like this, which is a indication that it was rocket fuel, it was missile fuel. So that was a decent like storage cluster of them that was hit in that one. Otherwise, a fire would be kind of like a regular fire, not just like a blinding sphere or a perpetual blinding sphere at least. Close that, close that. So that process is ongoing. With in terms of total like stuff that they have on hand, it's around like a third. is the rough guesstimate of what's been destroyed. So they do still have like roughly 2/3 of what they originally had on hand. And so it's going to be a bit more of a process, like waiting for them to show up with stuff to like pop up out of hiding, bomb that, or a cruise missile that, wait again for that, to happen again. Right, we had that. We did Iran and Pakistan. Oh, we can swing over to Myanmar. The rebels, the revolutionary forces across the country just keep winning. The military junta, or sorry, the military junta, uh, because as I was joking with a friend in a chat from Mexico about how you're supposed to call it junta because uh, Central and Latin America like claim ownership over the military dictatorship term, and I was like, no, look, I'm sorry. There's a whole other world out there that has military dictatorships and has had military dictatorships. You don't get to like copyright it. So just to annoy my friend, I'm gonna keep saying junta. Sorry, but the resistance just keeps on winning. They have they've pushed the military forces out of here, out of the arm. They have pushed them out of the northernmost states. They pushed them out of a big chunk of this state. They've started pushing them out of the northern chunk of this state. And in the Rakhine state, they've uh, started pushing them out of this area and have effectively cut them off from the borders. So they are just hammering them. And recently, a few days ago, another surrender actually occurred. 300 of the government's military forces actually surrendered. This is like the third mass surrender that the rebels have run into. I might have skipped over it. I don't. Okay, yeah, it was not that far back. Let's go back up. 16th, 16th, 15th, 15th. Myanmar, Myanmar. We need Myanmar. Where's Myanmar? Oh, there it is. Yes, they had a mass surrender of 300 dudes this time. They've had two other mass surrenders to them, both of which were about, one was 120 and the other was, I think, 150 or 160. So the junta's forces seemingly no longer want to fight for them. And also, for the second time in the last month or so, the the Myanmar government has lost an aircraft, as they have a few functional aircraft. They have a lot more on paper, just like Iran has a lot on paper. On paper, they have like 100 combat jets. Some of them are even like more modern things. In reality, because we we kind of have the whole satellite surveillance thing, and we can see when stuff actually like takes off from places, and their more advanced things never really fly. So they're kind of just sitting there. Part of the reason for that is the more advanced ones, their MiG 29s and their S-30s or Su-30s are, excuse me, please return to regular, reset north, thank you, are from Russia and are, supplied in both munitions and parts from Russia. And Russia is not resupplying Myanmar at the moment, nor are they resupplying a lot of other people who are dependent on their stuff, because Russia's kind of busy having its own cave in. So Myanmar has only been able to use A5 jets. Uh, no, not the North American one. What's the uh, Myanmar A5? I think it's A5. Yeah. So Myanmar is only able to use these. which are a Chinese remake version of a Russian aircraft, and they're just meant for bombing civilians, basically. So they've only been able to use those, and they have about 20 of them on paper, at least. 20 of them are functional. They lost one near the end of last year, and now they just lost another a few days ago. The rebels have shot down, well, been successful at shooting them down with manpads so far. Uh, I I'm pretty sure they're using old Strela manpads, if I'm guessing correctly on that one. At least that would be the most likely one I'd assume they have on hand. So things are continuing to fall apart for the military dictatorship in Myanmar. And in the immediate enough future, oh, I should have included that in the 2032 stream. One of the things you will actually probably see is a free, non-military dictatorship Myanmar. Granted, at that point, it will probably be in the process of splitting into 3 or 4 different countries. Although it kind of should have been the whole time, but the most of the groups are like in agreement with each other about the split up afterwards. So this is the Shah or Shan, I think. So assuming they just named it after the ethnic group, this chunk here you can kind of see the delineation of it would become Shan. This portion up here would become the Chin and Kachin provinces. I think the name would probably be Kachin, and then this chunk here would likely break off and become Rakhine, and then the rest of it would plus the arm, the rest of it would be the remainder of actual Myanmar. Since Myanmar always was, this clearly you can see from even just natural topography without needing a topographic map. Myanmar, as in like Myanmar, was always this inward valley plus the coastal slope versions on the other side of these Thailand mountains here. But so it will likely in the end fragment into separate nations, but whether those get officially recognized or not, but they will be for 3 or 4 nations that will be uh, free from this 50-year long military dictatorship that has had several periods, usually like 1 or 2 years at a time, where they throw up a president and like pretend that there was an election and things are democratic. But in reality, the same dudes were always in control the entire time. All right. Be responsible. Check that. 45 people. Who are all of you? Where is this coming from? Okay, we've been talking about important stuff for a while, so I my stream can be rewinded. You can go back on the timeline here, although it looks bigger for you, to wherever you want to actually catch everything. Make sure you do. About 10 minutes is where things officially began. Okay, so blah blah blah. Thanks, messing with my volume. One one tab pauses and lists browser tabs. Make it easy to find tabs when you're using installed them. This browser, I wasn't trying to look through browser tabs. I was scrolling through bookmarks on Twitter. Oh, sorry, X. I really need to actually start doing a camera so you can see me make the X with my forearms. Turn my sound is up. Okay, I already turned my sound decently up. You're the first one who's still had an issue an issue with the volume at this point. So if more people start like piling in saying it's still quiet, then I'll turn it up even more. But I've got it up like pretty high. Thanks for going over the water sourcing. Thoughts on the shale treadmill idea? I mean, I can tell you about shale overall. Uh, I mean, in general, U.S. shale production is basically peaking right now. A few 100,000 barrels per day more might come out of the Permian, but in general, the Permian is leveling off right around where I called for it to peak, which was about 6 million barrels per day. Give or take a couple 100,000 in either direction. Uh, the So I actually kind of got that one dead right, it seems. One of In total, like calls for things versus right versus wrong. I think I'm currently at like 17 or 18 versus 3 or 4. So I have like a 5 or 4 to 1 ratio. One of the things, one of the things that I was wrong about was Haynesville. I thought it would peak at like 13, but I was wrong. It ended up being able to go all the way up to 17. Actually, I have the DPR on me. Which one would it be? Two? Okay, two. Here, I'll show you guys here where some of these are. Let me zoom in a bit so that the graphs are bigger for you. So, uh, February hasn't happened yet. That's a projection, obviously. So look at the January number. This is the Permian, and it stalled there because of the price collapse. And even with the higher prices, especially in 2022, when prices were triple digits, even with the higher prices, it still started leveling off because this is just where it peaks. So, quite literally, it at least seems for the moment, it could suddenly jump up to 7 for all I know, but it seems for the moment it's actually going like dead center of where I thought it would peak. Currently at 5.97 million barrels per day, and it's leveling off there. You can see in the pattern. The gas output from it is still marginally increasing, but the oil output from it is pretty much done. And scroll up. Niobrara is not really important. It's pretty marginal. Yeah, Haynesville. That's the one. You can see it peaked and plateaued at 17 for a few years, but now it's on its decline slope. It's down towards 16 billion cubic feet per day. Go up further. Eagle Ford has been relatively stable around the 1.1 or 1.2 area for a while. And uh, as far as I can see from like the remaining reserves numbers, it should be able to hold on until 2026. So either in 2026 or right after 2026, it should actually start like a permanent decline. Then Bakken, I might end up being wrong about because Bakken, I'm expecting, or at least still was expecting, that this year should be like the final year. It should be able to hold on like this. And like starting next year, it should start downturning, but it looks like I might end up being wrong about Bakken. I might have underestimated that a little bit. Appalachia, I was spot on about. I said would peak a bit up over into the upper 30s, and it plateaued basically right around 36 billion cubic feet per day, and has been kind of declining, although it might still wobble around there for a bit. Currently, it's at about 35.5 billion cubic feet per day. And Anadarko is small scale, so Anadarko is kind of meaningless. So the downturn is about to start. Shale in Canada was never really meaningful. They had a portion of the Bakken. However, it only, even after all they've pushed out of it up to this day, it only composes about 300 to 400,000 barrels per day out of their 4.8 million barrels per day of oil production. Uh, Mexico's portion of the Eagle Ford Shale has turned out to not really be as volumetrically dense as the US portion, so it's not really promising. They're not really going to get a lot out of that. The Antrim Shale in Michigan ended up being a dead end. The Monterey Shale in California ended up being a dead end. And there were two smaller shales, the Barnett Shale in Texas and the Fayetteville Shale around, I believe, this area, the Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi border. Those were small scale and are kind of dead for the most part now. They've declined by about 80% from their peak production. Argentina is the one other place in the world that has shale that actually has the same volumetric, like productive quality of that in the US. Their Vaca Muerta shale down here. Now, granted, their oil companies don't have, the global reach and global profits that US oil companies do. So they haven't had the like endless basin of free capital to pour in to constantly expand the production there. However, Argentina has sold some of the acreage there to some of the larger global oil companies. So the pace at which the Vaca Muerta shale picks up might accelerate in the coming years. But so far, over the past few years since they started, they've gotten that up to about 400,000. And it looks like they, in terms of their overall national capacity, including that and their declining conventional oil, they of which they're at about in total, both put together, they're at about 700 right now. They should at least by 2032 or so be able to get up to like 1.1 or 1.2 million, most of which will be coming from the Vaca Muerta shale. There are other shales elsewhere, however, not a lot has been done with them. Algeria's natural gas shale is extremely prolific in terms of how much it contains, and it looks like it could be promising. It looks like it has the volumetric density. It looks like it has, the right layers of sediment and stuff around it. However, what's yet to be seen, which will be seen with actual fracking drilling when they test that, is how it actually breaks down, because when you get to shale, that's another portion. Since it's not liquid inside porous rock, it's pockets of liquid in really small droplet amounts scattered amongst non-porous rock that you have to break into pieces by fracturing. So what's a additional portion with shale that can cause issues is when you frack it, if the way that particular rock layer it's trapped in fractures has too much actual like rock components in it, too much heavy stuff, that it makes it not really easy to get the oil back to the surface. If you have to like uh pump down extra drilling like weight fluid to push stuff out, because you already have to pump a lot of water to push the oil and stuff out with shale. But if the rock layer breaks in such a way that a bunch of additional heavy sediment comes out with it, then you have to add a bunch of extra stuff into the drilling fluid, which then, makes it even more expensive and more energy intensive. So that's like the one final hurdle that we're waiting to see with Algeria's potential shale gas. Since I kept saying shale oil, in their case, it's shale gas. Shale gas, along with natural gas itself, is usually easier because of the whole just natural expansive property of gas. It will usually find its way to the surface on its own. But if you did that with shale gas, it wouldn't really produce at viable rates. So you also do have to push the shale gas out forcibly to get it to come out at the rates that you wanted to. Whereas the shale oil basically kind of just wouldn't really move. You have to just brute force the whole thing. Europe, sorry for you guys. I know you guys are like half my viewership. You do have some shale formations there, and we have tested them out. When I say we, I'm not specifically referring to me and the US, since I'm metaphorically representing the US. I am, in this case, referring to just humanity in general. We have tested your stuff, and it looks like you guys' shale formations are just not really anything worthwhile. So, sorry guys, your oil stuff is just kind of dead, with the exception of Norway. Big, strong Viking Norway is going to keep you guys alive indefinitely. And despite all the pessimism from some of my viewers in Norway about how Norway's going too green and isn't going to do oil and gas anymore, the Norwegian government just sold off a whole bunch of new acreage offshore of the shelf here and offshore up in the Barents Sea as well. Or sorry, not acreage. You guys don't use acres over there in Europe. You guys are weird and like snobby upper class. I forgot. You guys use hectares. I can't do an actual British accent, so that's the closest you're going to get. There is a shale formation here in Russia. Actually, I think it underlies the Krasnoyarsk region, the Boshanov shale, and it is just too spread out. It's too thin. Russia's managed to get up to like 60,000 barrels per day out of it, but it's taken a decade and a half to reach that level, and it's just not performing the way anyone would want. China does have shale formations, and they are producing from them. However, they just don't have the same volumetric density that those in the US do, and they are about 2 to 3 times deeper than those in the US. Whereas those in the US are usually only like 4 or 6,000 feet deep. Those in China are more like 12 to 15,000 feet deep. So China's been having issues with those. They are still viable. They're not like they're not dead ends. Like, will you stop messing up? Thank you. They're not dead ends like the European shales are. Excuse me. Get off my screen. Get off my screen. They're not dead ends like the European shales are, but they're not what China would have hoped for. So, China is currently at about 2.4 or 2.5 billion cubic feet per day of natural gas production from their shales in the Sichuan and Chongqing provinces. And for shale oil, they're only around like I think 80 or 100,000 barrels a day. And they were hoping to go up to like I think 6 billion cubic feet per day. However, uh, it's looking more like they're potentially not going to be able to get past 3 or 4 because on that pathway they were supposed to be up to like 3.5 by now. However, over the last number of years, they've started leveling out. They got up to 2.1, then to 2.3, and now like 2.4 or 2.5 over the course of last year. So it's not really playing out for them anymore. One other place that has shale formations that we're not certain of yet, we don't know how good they might be, is Australia, which is to no surprise because Australia has everything. Australia has oil and gas. They're only really doing their gas at the moment on this shelf up here. A lot of their additional oil would probably be in this basin here, but they aren't going to do that much stuff there probably because a lot of the interior is where a lot of the like protected wildlife stuff is, which in Australia's case, I actually go for it like all the way with that. They do, however, also probably have a huge chunk here, uh, just because of the way the different surveys have looked for the Great Australian Bight Shelf. But again, they're not really touching the oil. They are willing to do the natural gas, though, of which there is a lot off this flat flat shore here, and they're at around 16 or 17 billion cubic feet per day. And with future stuff, like over the next 10 years, they could potentially get up to like 26 billion cubic feet per day. But they do have several shale formations. However, those are, of course, on land and in the interior. So whether anything actually happens with that, we'll have to wait to see. And then there is the shale formation offshore of Bahrain in very shallow water, but it is subsea shale off here that they are working on developing but they're running into some issues because they would either have to frack it with salt water, or they'd have to build an additional bunch of water desalination plants to desalinate salt water to then frack it with fresh water, since fresh water is what is normally used. So they're kind of running into issues with that, and that whole thing might not actually materialize, but we'll see. Okay, so that was a whole off-ramp segment from a viewer question. We'll now move on into other regular stuff. Once I check chat again, like a responsible streamer. And again, well, there go those viewers. We did, at least we hit a record though. We hit 45. We still got 30 something of you. Stop saying I have zero bit rate. I do not have zero bit rate. My bit rate is not zero. And I just checked. I just reached under the computer to check. And since for those of you who are unaware, I am using the exhaust heat from my laptop to warm up some butter. I'm dual purposing energy so that I can use that butter to make chocolate chip cookies later. And you can go on a whole rant if you want about how I'm wasting humanity's resources by making chocolate chip cookies instead of just eating rice and bread. But screw you. So, what do we have next? Oh wait, there were other things. Hold on. Okay, thanks. Somehow it does come out very low, but okay. I already cranked it up. How much more do I need to crank it? Okay, I'm officially asking Chad if Chad is actively paying attention. So, is it just those two, or is anybody else having low volume issues? Because I have my volume like cranked compared to what it would normally be. Uh, Potash production and trade. Uh, Potash, that data comes out with the MCS, which releases yearly, which is a compilation of the mining outputs, levels and rates of different things. So once you actually get down into them, this release is usually in February. So the new one with 2023's data should almost be out. And yeah, it has the previous year, which will be 2022, and the previous year, which will be 2022, and the immediate previous year, which will now be 2023. And you can look at stuff. I also have graphs. I should just put. I'll make another Google Doc. Oh, speaking of which, self-plug time. For anyone who's unaware, if you go to my channel, I said if you thank you YouTube for finally responding to me. As I said, if you go to my channel, you go to the more recent videos, and you go down to the description. There is a whole listing of Google Docs with all kinds of different resources and stuff that are free, available 24/7 for you to look at. Like this one, the oil and gas exploration maps. These show maps of regions and or countries up to present day and what portions of them have already been explored for oil and gas versus which portions haven't. So, like, this is the one for the Caspian Sea. And if you go down, and areas shaded in gray are areas that geologically and topographically could not contain oil and gas to begin with. So here's the one for China. So they're basically done onshore. They still have a bit of the Taklamakan Desert that is still unexplored relatively, and they're pushing offshore, and they've already got a decent bit of offshore explored and haven't really found as much as they would want. So, for example, that's one of them. But there's a whole bunch that I have already. And since you brought that subject up, I will now make one that will have the constantly updated versions of the production levels of different things. As I make these graphs, since a lot of graphs you'll find This is the reason I started doing a bunch of the Google Docs with graphs like this, since for a lot of things, the graphs you'll find if you just Google them and look up stuff will not update unless it's been like 5 years. So, like, this is global lead production, which peaked in 2013. And then you have others. Limestone, obviously, no issues. Lithium, no immediate issues, except for an issue that we're going to talk about in a minute. And so you can do these, see all of these. And you were asking specifically about potash. Yeah, so yeah, you can see 2022, there was a decent drop there from a collapse in Belarusian and Russian potash output from their mines. And they are big producers. However, unfortunately for them, Canada exists. So that's not really something they can hold over the world. Canada is the Giga Chad producer and actually is expanding their production. They were already going to because of growing demand, but now also because of the Russia stuff, they're expanding their production. So down here on the US border, around the North Dakota border, there is just huge amounts of potash in the ground. There is an amount mined in the US and North Dakota as well. Usually that was only like enough to meet our own amounts, but now we're expanding that as well because of the Russia stuff and the price spike that that's brought. So unfortunately, for Russia's desires, Canada exists. So, you know, sorry, sucks to be you. And for who else does potash? On go all the way down. Who do we have? Who else? Oh yeah, I forgot. Deutschland actually has a decent amount. Israel, although that might be in a bit of in a bit of an issue at the moment. And Jordan's fine at least. China, but China is mostly supplying China. Chile does have also could expand their production decently, although Chile is having issues because Chile constantly just likes being a problem for everybody. In fact, actually, we go down to that. So everybody remembers or may remember in Panama, uh, the uh, the company First Quantum had to shut down their copper mine because of environmentalist protests. So the government has ordered them to just close the mine altogether forever. That mine was responsible for about 1% of global copper supply. Now, because of the revenue they've lost from that mine, they can't maintain some of their other stuff while prices are so low. For nickel, at least, they shouldn't be as low as they are, but they are low. Uh, they've had to shut down one of their nickel mines as well in Australia, which was responsible, ironically, for also 1% of global nickel supply. So that is hurting things. And now, also, in Chile, the world's largest lithium mine, responsible for 25,000 tons of lithium per year, or about 20% of global production, not 1%, 20%, was forced to shut down because of environmentalist protesting by locals. They have since relinquished and let it resume, but they're probably going to come back because that is what has been happening off and on. So that's now starting to cause problems. Uh, so it's kind of interesting slap to the face that actually environmentalists are now trying to hamper the green energy transition that they're the ones who champion and want to happen. So this, that's kind of that's kind of self-defeatist. And to a person who's trying to think, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But most of humanity doesn't think. So I guess, to them it probably makes sense. I should check chat again, like a responsible streamer. Oh, was that 46? We hit 46. I wonder if it's a phone thing. Sound loud. Uh, it might, yeah, it might be a phone thing. Why are you using a phone? Use a computer, dude. Use a laptop. Phones are for cringe, are for cringe Zoomers. Like I mean, part of the reason, actually, part of the reason why I'm able to like afford my existence so easily, part of that is because I don't have a, quote unquote smartphone. The phone I got was like $40, and I typically it takes me about 5 to 6 years to go through one to break it, and then I get a new one that's also about $40, and it doesn't do anything like impressive. It doesn't do internet. It doesn't do data. It doesn't have Siri. It doesn't have chatbot GPT. It phones people and it texts people, and I can set an alarm clock on it, obviously. Not that I wake up to those, but that's part of how I roll. And also, I don't, like I said, I don't have data. I don't have any kind of like fancy plans or anything. No Wi-Fi hotspot, so my phone bill is extremely cheap for having my service, and also various other means of not having expenses like not driving a car. But that is an echo from when I lived in back up home in Alaska, because back up home we actually have public transit, a really well designed system. But ever since 2020, I got 2020 and lost my job. So now, for the last few years, I've been trapped living down in the regular U.S. at my parents' place in South Carolina. And the regular U.S. is not fun. It's a hot death trap. And also, despite what people would think, the regular US is more expensive than Alaska. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but back up home, we have free heating and free water, and we have public transit. So, you don't have to own a vehicle, and nor do you have to, like, pay the insurance on said vehicle. And also, the rent prices back up home are like hugely cheaper than a lot of stuff I've heard down here. Like down in the regular US, even outside of cities, I keep hearing people saying like their rent for like an apartment is like, you know, 1,200, 1,400 bucks a month plus utilities. Whereas back up home, like uh, one of the decent places I would have liked to live was about 900 bucks a month. Whereas one of the lower places I would, be okay with was about 650 a month or so. So that, it kind of sounds really counterintuitive, and it actually is counterintuitive. Like the only way back up home is more expensive is in the form of some like grocery goods. Since it has to be transported a long way and transported fast. So like the only real issue was like milk. Like milk was about like $4 as opposed to $3, which is what it is down in most places like down here. Although it's more expensive in Hawaii and in California because California sucks and Hawaii is in the middle of the ocean. But I mean, apart from that, back up home was actually cheaper, and also I was under like a partially state funded, not state as in the states of the U.S., but the state of Alaska within the U.S. I was under a partially state funded healthcare thing, so my healthcare was like really dirt cheap, and just walking in to see the doctor just in general was actually free. If I had to like get medicine, I had to pay for that, obviously. And if I had to get something done, like blood drawn, I had to pay for that, but I didn't really have to pay all that much. Uh, oh yeah, that was an off ramble from the whole phone thing and the whole not owning a car thing. But moving on from that, we have the inevitable invasion of Armenia by Azerbaijan. If you thought this is just my opinion, there was that clip I showed you guys months back of Aliyev making a speech about how Armenia doesn't exist. It's just Western Azerbaijan, and it will be reclaimed. And Erdogan next door in Turkey said, it would only be the reasonable thing to do for Armenia to give up the provinces of Vayots and Sunik. I might have got those reversed, and give those to Azerbaijan. Well, now, uh, if you still weren't there yet, I will mute it and I don't know, maybe randomly like put something over half of it, enough so that we can just see the text. Where is it? Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan. Come on, Azerbaijan. Where are you hiding, Aliyev? Come on, Aliyev. I know you're there. There he is. So, uh, Ilham Aliyev is the president of Azerbaijan, and in this interview, he just starts making up history. He does what the kids refer to as schizo posting. Hold on. Come on. Where's the diagonal arrow for me to shrink this? Okay, it's not there. See, that's not what I told you to do. Okay, you know what? Screw you. We're going to get the calculator. Calculator will be of use. So, mute. So here he goes, just making up history. Over the course of this, he just straight up says, he just straight up, well, uh, first admitting to the whole establishment of Azerbaijan in 1918, but uh, starts, talking about how all of Armenia was just like, you know, Azerbaijan actually, and it always was, and it was artificially handed to Armenia by the Soviet Union. And, this is not how history is. Like, no one, no one says this. Like, blah blah blah. It's obvious. It's publicly known. No, it isn't, because that's not what was. Like, you and your government are the only ones saying this. Like, the entire rest of the world, like, acknowledges the truth, which is that Armenia was Armenia, and it's been Armenia for about 2,500 years. But so we're going with schizo posting here, and so not even the USSR historical records say any of this nonsense that you're saying, and even the Ottoman Empire, the one that tried to erase Armenia from existence, even the Ottoman Empire's even the Ottoman Empire's historical records say that Armenia was Armenia. You know, that's kind of a tell when, like, the one other, like, entity that wanted to erase Armenia from existence, they state in their records that Armenia was Armenia. So, we're just going like completely off the deep end here and just like making stuff up, like whatever we feel like, which is referred to as schizo posting, which is always fun. So he's laying his justification for the inevitable invasion of Armenia, which will, if Iran has not been decimated in eventual like U.S. strikes before then, uh, will draw Iran against Azerbaijan, which will then draw Turkey against Iran, in which case Iran will lose that. Uh, Ultimately, via predominantly air engagements and airstrikes, uh, U- U.S. plus other associated friends will not allow the actual like annexation of Armenia itself to happen. Nakhchivan was whatever, because that kind of was in Azerbaijan. But if they actually go for this, then it's gonna things are gonna light. I don't know when they might go for that, since time frames have been way thrown off over the last few years. But that's also an interestingly underhanded reason why we might be perpetually like not actually striking back against Iran for anything Iran does is we might actually be trying to like keep Iran alive until Azerbaijan does that so that Iran can soak up a bit of stuff while we eventually also start like doing airstrikes, which would be kind of funny if it went down that way. That would be like this weird coincidence where you see the US plus allies actually like teaming up with Iran. That would be a really funny like unexpected out of nowhere turnout. But what actually does happen all depends on who does what and who does it when. And unfortunately, it looks like Iran is really trying to speed run their own collapse. So, an unpreferable version or order of events might actually be what takes place. I should check my chat. Twitch sometimes has lower mobile quality. Yeah, okay, it probably is. What do I like about Alaska? I like everything about Alaska. The only thing about Alaska I don't like, there is one thing and one thing only, and that is Alaska Airlines, which I don't really consider an Alaskan thing anymore because they branched out and have become just a major intercontinental, like inside the U.S. Continental carrier. Alaska Airlines sucks. Is absolutely horrible. They have no care for safety. They skip on maintenance constantly. They are stupid enough to buy the 737 Max. That should tell you enough. Uh, Decent airlines that are Alaskan within Alaska are Raven Air and Penn Air. They operate turboprops, SAB 2000s. They are very good. Flew on them once on a trip down to Anchorage and then back up. So they're good. Alaska Airlines, horrible. Don't use them. Fly with Delta. Always fly with Delta. Also, United is horrible. Don't fly with them. Southwest is horrible. Don't fly with them. Southwest was also stupid enough to buy the 737 Max. So, that should speak for itself. But fly with Delta. And if you go within Alaska, fly with Raven Air or with Penn Air. But don't fly with Alaska Airlines. But everything about Alaska, I love. Alaska is home. For one, there's like, free necessities. There's public transit I could rely on. We have seasonal fluctuation. We have a couple months of summer, then a few weeks of beautiful fall, and a few weeks of spring. And then there's the 9 months of eternal Arctic darkness and 6 feet of snow. That is my favorite part. I absolutely love and miss the winters from back up home. So if you are on my Patreon or anything, or if you send anything to PayPal or through Super Chats, know that I am not banking up money to get a Ferrari and film one of those stupid videos that were popular by big YouTubers in the 2010s, where they're like, "I'm in the garage with my Ferrari, but what I really value is my bookshelf over here." I will be banking your money for an inevitable remigration home at some point, preferably before 2032. But anyways, moving on to wait, I should check the other things from chat. Average 2K in Boston for one bedroom apartment. Interesting. Okay. Depends on yeah, obviously your life expenses depend on your consumption patterns. My consumption patterns are really low. I and that is, kind of by design. So, all right, what else do we have on here? Okay, a few more things. Germany, Deutschland, has introduced some policy changes. They have decided they're going to end the whole massive open immigration thing. They are implementing they're implementing harsher restrictions soon. one of which is uh, they're the you can bring your entire family thing will only be applied to high skilled labor or migrants. So anyone who's in the high skilled category can still bring their family with them to Germany, but people outside of the high skilled category, that will not be like a given thing anymore. And also, they are ending the ability for uh, migrants to apply for welfare, and they're changing it over to literally a food and utilities card that will only it will be restricted, as in it will not permit transactions for anything other than food and necessity items, as opposed to the actual welfare that they were given up to this point, which was just raw money. They were just given, like, I don't know, 1,500 euros or something every month, because Germany noticed a pattern of people coming to Germany and just collecting the welfare, and since it was physical money, just like sending the money away back overseas. So they're stopping the whole like actual welfare applications thing for migrants and switching it over to a like restricted purchases card that will only be able to buy food and or pay like utilities. So it won't be able to send money. And uh, that was almost it. Germany is also since Germany refuses to like want to send its own equipment to Ukraine. The secret reason for which is Germany doesn't want to give away the fact that its own domestic like engineered military stuff is actually kind of crap. The Leopard 2 tank is like the only good thing that they make. The their other stuff is just really not that great. If you want military equipment, go with U.S., France, or sometimes the UK. Although you guys in the UK, you've started slipping in recent years, which is disappointing me. Or in modern day now, you can go with the Polish slash South Korea mix of stuff, since they are constantly tag teaming on designing weapon systems, and they're really good. But since Germany doesn't want to send any of its own better systems because it would kind of reveal the fact that they suck, they've made a an agreement to just like let foot the bill for Ukraine purchasing additional like weapon systems from whoever it wants to, which will not be Germany because Ukraine has kind of gotten wind of the fact that Germany is sort of trying to conceal the fact that their stuff sucks. So Ukraine is going to be buying some additional French and Polish and Slovakian and Czech stuff. Uh, and I think Germany's agreement was 7 billion euros, whereas the U.S. Funding and armaments thing is going to be doled out soon enough. The sticking issue is from the Republican side and is for getting Biden to actually sign off on a like stricter border control thing and putting like harsher restrictions on who can or can't apply for asylum, which, as of an announcement earlier today, he just agreed to do. So once that actually gets like written up, which will take a week, because laws and agreements of things, if you actually look them up, like on Congress's website, uh, they're typically like between 500 and 65,000 pages of legal language. So that's going to take a little while to type up. Uh, they do have all their interns, all their temps and interns, like political science college students that are doing an internship with them. That the Senate and House of Representatives effectively use as slave labor to do all the typing for them. So though they get locked in a closet and get no sleep for a week to type up all 65,000 pages of law, and so that will take like a week or whatever to actually push that out. But once it actually comes out, Biden's agreed to sign it, despite the open border being one of the things he likes the most. But uh, beyond that, we also have China redacting their numbers. So, for those who recall, I said in the last stream that China's data came out, and as expected, they did drop down to only about 8 million births last year, and their total fertility rates declined to 0.98, and their population dropped from 1.412 down to 1.409 billion. However, they this week suddenly said, no, 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 unpublish those, redact those numbers. Those are not true, and they insist that actually these new numbers they threw out instead are true, in which they basically just took each of those numbers and reduced the loss by a third or so. So I guess they knew it was too late to just like try to say something unbelievable, which would be that like nothing changed or whatever. But they still wanted to like redact it and dial it back and try to make it at least seem like it was a bit less so that it wouldn't look as bad. So they went with cutting back each loss uh, by a third or so, or by a quarter. So now they're saying, no, 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 no. The population didn't go down to 1.409. It only went down to 1.410. And no, we didn't drop all the way down to 0.98 fertility rate. We only dropped down to 1.02. So, they're backpedaling, trying to pretend that their, you know, massive, immediate, like, demographic, like, actual sinkhole collapse isn't happening as bad as it actually is. But then, nobody didn't see the backpedaling coming. Pretty much anyone with a brain could have predicted that. And then over in Russia, Russia is starting to actually fall apart now. So they've gone the route of like radical Islamist countries, and I'm disgusted by the whole naked celebrity party thing that did happen last week. That is a disgusting thing. But in most other like free countries, which Russia insists it is one, no one would really actually like care. However, a bunch of the people from that ended up getting arrested and are now getting like some of them are getting fined like the equivalent of $1 million for it. So Russia has actually started morality policing, which is something that's their enemy that they insist never died and have just never gotten over their love affair with Nazi Germany. That's something Nazi Germany was kind of famous for. That's also something that these radical Islamist countries that Russia sort of pretends to not like, but also likes at the same time, but heavily pretends to be, more free than, is also something they do a lot. So this is not a good road to suddenly be turning down. Also, you guys may remember from the previous stream, there was that massive retail warehouse fire in St. Petersburg, 50,000 square meters of products and facility burned down. Massive heating outages have been occurring all across Russia as the stuff is just breaking down. Some of it actually happening inside Moscow now. One of the two, so things happening in the two sheltered regions that are, supposedly the only two that Russia actually cares about, and thus the whole country, supposedly, according to people both inside of and outside of Russia, could break down and fall back into complete abject poverty. But as long as Moscow and St. Petersburg were fine, nobody would care. Well, now stuff is actually happening to Moscow and St. Petersburg. And Crimea, which they kind of also half care about. So Crimea collapsed into a blackout over the last 48 hours or so, and as of last reports, was still in one. And also, uh, heating issues are now occurring in, I think, Novosibirsk is supposed to be Russia's fourth or third biggest city. I'm not sure which, or it might be fifth. In Novosibirsk, there was a mass heating failure. We're gonna have to scroll. Okay, no, scroll up in this case to find these. That was the one in Nizhny Novgorod. Where's the one in Novosibirsk? Because the one in Novosibirsk was a lot more massive. Oh, well, while we're on that, this is a another large fire, another thing burning down. This was a new polyester plant in Rostov, which is over here, as Russia was trying to, before the war started, move its economy into more than just oil and gas. They were trying to like move into actually doing like more higher end refined products instead of, just exporting like fuel products. So they finished this new polyester plant, and it was actually a pretty big one. And oh no, it caught fire and burned down. Okay, well that's gone. There's the whole several cities thing. While the temperatures are below freezing, some of which are as low as -20. Here we go. This was the one of the Novosibirsk ones. So yeah, that is pretty gargantuan. That is the steam cloud from the massive like centralized heating main that runs under the city, and it burst open. And so the steam is just piling into the atmosphere, as you can see, because it was quite a large bust. And we also have fun times in Bashkiri or Bashkortostan. The government arrested one of like their primary activists who was both anti-war and pro Bashkiri independence, and they arrested him for inciting ethnic hatred. And in response, people started protesting, and then the police responded, with tear gas and started beating people eventually. And the people, instead of dispersing like regular Russians did at the start of the war, the people fought back and are in the process of fighting back right now. So there is a constant stuff ongoing there with them. I think there was one other video of it. I think there was a more recent one. Is that no? That's Iran, China, Iran, Iran. Uh, there's uh, there's one of the places from Crimea showing the blackout. Hold on, one of the buttons fell off my keyboard. Let me reattach it. Attach the stupid. It's the down arrow key, unfortunately, which is, a commonly used button, so makes it look like I'm randomly scrolling. Okay, I don't have the additional video, the one from today. Oh, and also, uh, Russia, you remember from the new population numbers last year, they refused to acknowledge both casualties in Ukraine and also refused to acknowledge the million plus people that left Russia. So they refused to like officially put them as a population loss. However, they've done this before, and now they're doing it again. Uh, in a means of mocking them, saying that their departure, cleansed Russian society. But they are like openly acknowledging that those people did leave and are gone and are not coming back. But on the population like numbers, they still refuse to actually report that as a population decrease because that would make it look like their demographic collapse is actually what it is. Oh, and also there's our stuff going on in Belgorod. This one was not this one was not even actually like a drone strike from Ukraine. This one was just a substation just fighting up, just lighting up. Oh, and also looks like the cruise missile stuff might actually not even be as still stacked as I thought it was on their part because Russia now has resorted to conducting some of its strikes on random Ukrainian apartment buildings uh, with this big, giant Tubalard anti-ship ballistic semi-cruise missile from 1962. That was should have been retired. That thing should have been in a scrapyard somewhere, but now all of a sudden they're using this, using some of these. That's interesting and very indicative of a top-notch military. Uh, what were the few other things on their end? Oh yeah, Ukraine now they already had the Beaver drone, which is a propeller one. They now have a jet-powered drone of their own development with a extensive range, and it is in development. However, what the successfully tested actually means is it's what was used in that attack on St. Petersburg yesterday or this morning. I forgot which. But one of the oil export terminals and refineries near St. Petersburg was struck by an unknown drone. Russia reports there is absolutely zero damage because, of course, Russia reports there's absolutely zero damage. But Russia also reports that no ships were struck whenever ships sink. So it's a habit, just like the alcoholism that I unfortunately discovered was more real than I thought it was. Like I was giving Russia so much credit this whole time. I really thought it was just a stereotype. And then I keep seeing it and seeing it and seeing it for real. And it's like, oh, okay, okay, I guess it is a real thing. But so that made it all the way up there. And what was the one other thing? There's one other thing. Oh yeah, more more drunken pilots. I don't know if they were actually drunk. It's just what I'm phrasing it as. But more Russian aircraft pilots hitting power lines. So this was a transport helicopter for the military hit the power lines and crashed. This has happened countless times. Even Su-25 attack aircraft after taking off have hit power lines on their way, like flying into Ukraine and just nosedived into the ground. This was okay. This was close. I thought for a moment that was just somewhere like randomly out there in Russia, but that was in Bryansk, so that actually was close. But more power line striking going on, which I mean isn't exactly going to help the whole electrical deterioration situation that's ongoing. Right, I think that is where my mouse cursor freezes apparently, but that is mostly it for this one. With a few other updates. Actually, hold on. Let me actually check the notepad here. Oh no, wait, that's not it. There's more. So over in Nizhny or Nizhny Novgorod, they'd probably get persnickety and say you have to add the entire phrase each time. It's around here somewhere. There it is, Nizhny. Okay. So here, uh, one of their largest refineries for supplying their domestic fuel, gasoline and diesel and stuff, about 340,000 barrels per day of refinery capacity, has gone offline because of, as as stated by Russian officials, it was simply phrased as, in quotation marks, an unspecified incident, whatever that's supposed to mean. So that went down, and so that's going to cause a bit of a supply issue dip internally. That is 340,000 barrels a day. So that's about 10% of what their normal pre-war internal oil demand was. Their demand now is down to around like 2.8. So that's a bit more than 10%. So they said to compensate, they're probably going to have to cut back on some fuel exports to retain those internally. And was there anything else here? I think that is it. Almost. Except France is sending Ukraine an additional 40 of their Scalp cruise missiles, which is a decent bit because the damage that Ukraine actually has been able to do with just a few dozen Scalps and Storm Shadows has been pretty impressive. So they're sending another 40, and they're going to start sending monthly shipments of smart guided bombs, and that already have been modified to still be able to be used by Ukraine's Soviet era aircraft, although they can also and thus will probably be used with the F 16s that totally aren't already there. And also, they shall be sending an additional 78 Caesar artillery systems, which is a really impressive system, decent range, not as much as the Swedish Archer system. Sweden has everyone built on their artillery range. However, Sweden is, beaten by everybody else in a lot of other things, like smart decision making. I mean, the only other time Sweden actually gets a pass from me is their decision to finally commit to going further with nuclear power, which also France has done. So, apart from extending the life ranges of their newer nuclear plants, the ones that are like 60 plus years old, they are going to retire because you should. However, France has said they are going to commission the construction of 14 or more new nuclear reactors in the coming decade and a half or so, so that they will remain at least 60% nuclear power, and actually, probably once all those are finished, go up to something like 75% nuclear power. And this is on top of Finland either just starting or being about to start their 2 gigawatt additional reactor that will take them up to something like half nuclear power. Sweden finally announcing they're going to go further nuclear. Poland signing the contracts and issuing the money, doling it out for the construction start of 2 nuclear plants in Poland, one which will be 6 gigawatts and one which will be 3. So those will be finished by 2031 or 2032 for one of them, and 2033 or 2034 for the other, and will effectively make Poland half nuclear powered. Slovakia and Hungary are deciding to do additional nuclear reactors, and the UK even has said they're going to commission 10 new nuclear reactors or more over the coming time period. The only one here that's being dumb is Deutschland, of course. But again, you guys have a history of bad decisions, then again, don't you? So, if you set yourself up to get bullied, I'm gonna bully you. I'm sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry because you've earned it and you just keep asking for more. So, Germany wants to be dumb, but France wants to be smart, as does the UK, apparently, after, decades of not being smart. And after so many poor choices, Sweden wants to be smart. Finland has always been smart. Sumi is awesome. Polska is awesome. Magyarország is not as awesome as I would want them to be. Still my favorite language, though. Magyar or Magyarul is always my favorite language. But Hungary makes too many ill-fated decisions that I can't line up with. Polska, though, excellent. Czech Republic, awesome. And who else is on my awesome list? Latvia. Yeah, I love Latvia. Both Latvia itself and Latvia as a language. That would be my second favorite. But Deutschland used to love you guys, but you've just gotten so dumb. And you just keep committing, you keep doubling down. It's almost like someone else over here. You just keep doubling down on stuff. All right, that is officially the end of the list of stuff. So now I will. Ooh, cash money. Thank you. Uh, now I will look at chats and answer any further questions if any arise. But then I'm going to hop off and make myself some cookies. Waste humanity's limited resources on my desire to taste something good. I think Somaliland should be an independent country on the Red Sea Quartel, Somaliland, Ethiopia. Uh, yeah, that is an issue because, as with all things, not everything is like of the same orientation within stuff. Because Odal, this region up here, Odal, is not like they're not in with it. Like they're not actually like up for the whole Somaliland thing. And then over here, these two border regions on the border of Puntland, they are also like not along with it. It's the central three here that are like the real big ones behind the whole Somaliland thing. The others were with them in the beginning because remember the separation came in the 90s when Somalia collapsed and turned into what you think of when you hear of Somalia. Somalia is no longer that Somalia. Somalia now is actually kind of stable and is starting to rise upwardly in every way. However, Somaliland is, still a thing out there. And these guys on the east, they were kind of thinking about rejoining Somalia. They're not like too sure. Adal is kind of screwed. They couldn't really if they wanted to, because of the separation thing. These three in the middle are pretty adamant about it, though, and they're the ones who signed the deal with Ethiopia. But, even if they suddenly turned 180 and refused, there is the whole thing of like Ethiopia might just invade and try to like claim territory since, that's what everybody is doing around the world right now. Everybody is having revanchist moments. Everybody is, begging for their old empires to come back. Uh, However, it wouldn't really go all that well for Ethiopia. Kind of hasn't. They've invaded Somalia in the past, like a lot, and it has never gone well. But so if those, uh, if those three like really like solidly wholesale majority want to stay separately, then I would say yes. If if it is the case that the population is no longer so really with it, and it's actually like the governments in the region that kind of want to stay as a separate thing, then I would obviously say no. Uh, Adal, it doesn't really matter what I say because they're just kind of screwed anyways because they're kind of cut over there. These regions here kind of want to be back with Somalia now, so if they actually like vie for that, then Somaliland should kind of let go. But I mean, things also depend. I mean, like Somaliland left Somalia because Somalia became what Somalia was from 1990 up until 2015 or so, and Somalia is no longer that Somalia. So they could reintegrate. They don't like necessarily have like huge like cultural issues with each other. Now their governments do have issues with each other though. Uh, in Ethiopia's case, like if you were asking me like should Tigray and Afar and Amara be independent? Yeah, they should because they are like wholesale different people, different languages and everything, different cultures, and also the Ethiopian government is trying to kill them. I mean, they succeeded at killing a lot of the Tigray people via starvation over the last 3 years. They literally starved 2 million people to death up here. So Ethiopia is trying a whole ethnic cleansing thing. And also, if you look back on like the history of Ethiopia, this this is Ethiopia. This, or in some cases this, or in some cases out to here, uh, was always either the Ethiopian or Abyssinian Empire. Empires are called empires for a reason, and it's not because people willingly want to be a part of them. So, just so you know, in case you were unironically being a white supremacist by means of thinking only white people ever had empires, uh, empires are not, they're not just a exclusively white people thing. Other people also did empires. The only primary difference was that because of the technology granted by the Industrial Revolution, white people empires just ended up being like globe hungry mega spanning. And actually, I also have this, which I was going to show at some point. So this is roughly around 1900 ish. This is what the world looked like. These were the associate empires, most of which collapsed despite the flack that people give the US, especially Brits are like really heavy against like the US. I don't know if you guys remember, but there was all this and all those millions of people you starved to death in India and Africa and all the other stuff you did. I mean, we also did our stuff like, genociding the Native Americans. That was a thing that happened that we also still lie about in textbooks and insist, like with the Trail of Tears, that only 20,000 were killed. No, it was in the millions. There's a reason why they're not around anymore. Now, do you see? And that was a evil action. Do you see Russia? Russia, do you see how easy it is to say something like that, to admit that? However, you guys still insist that you did no such thing. None of it was conquest. Everybody wanted to be part of the Russian Empire. They just wanted to so much. It was so lovely. No, you were an empire, and modern Russia is still an empire. And for those who don't know, at the start of the 1900s, the U.S. actually, uh, because of the Spanish American War, owned these things over here. However, unlike France and the UK, when these three wanted to leave, we kind of just let them in 1902. I'm pretty sure it was 1902. It might have been 1901. They wanted to leave, and we just let them leave. Whereas I don't know. Okay, I picked on the UK enough. We'll use France this time. France. What did France do when Algeria wanted to leave? In the civilized modern day, in the 1960s, not the 1800s, even the 1960s. What did France do to the Algerians? Oh yeah, they massacred 2 million of them. Interesting. Japan also controlled Korea and Taiwan. The U.S. controlled the Philippines and was we had the agreement was like a 10-year thing that started in 1935. That's they would gain full independence over the course of 10 years. However, that process ended up getting interrupted by this whole event that Artie Boy up here started across the Pacific because they couldn't let Germany be the only one to cause the deaths of 70 million people. They wanted to kill tens of millions too. But that interrupted that whole process, so that resumed afterwards. And then in 1950 something, the Philippines was independent. And then these boys up here, though, they clung on to the bitter end until the 60s and 70s. Germany kind of had an empire. They had Togo and Namibia, but that kind of got, shredded in the world wars. Belgium up here also killed like 10 million people down in the Congo, but no one ever talks about them for some reason. They get to be quiet in the corner and get away with it. The Netherlands, the Netherlands, by all means, did kill a bunch of people, just not anywhere near to the extent that like the other powers did. Like the Netherlands manages to slip by on the excuse primarily of they were like truly just in it for the money, where they didn't really want like colonization, as in like throwing, as in like turning this into Dutchland islands. They were just there for the money. However, in the process of just being there for the money, they still also killed hundreds of thousands of people because, that is a thing that happens. And then, there was all this out here, Russian Empire, where they went like, you know, reverse Mongol horde. And the Russian Empire, collapsed in World War One, shrunk to the Soviet Union, collapsed at the end of the Cold War, shrunk down to modern day Russia. However, modern day Russia is still an empire because there are countries inside that would like to not be a part, like Dagestan, Chechnya, Kalmykia, Tatarstan, Bashkiri, and Buryatia and Tuva, possibly. However, there's the underlying issue of Russia likely splitting in a set of one third and two thirds that it would kind of have to see what happens with all this to then see what these guys do. But this is Russia. This gargantuan thing is not Russia. Just like this isn't, and this isn't. And actually, Russia isn't the only one. France over here, actually is still holding on to a bit of empire in present day. They have French Guiana, although French Guiana kind of flips back and forth between whether they want out or not. They can't seem to make up their mind. New Caledonia, the island that France holds on to over here, does actually want to be free. However, France keeps using the excuse of the fact that the majority didn't vote for it. However, the reason the majority didn't vote for it was, for one, in one of the votes, a bunch of French people who moved there over the later 1900s voted no, obviously, and also during the second independence vote, the the actual people of New Caledonia did something that is very stupid. Don't boycott votes. That doesn't prove a point. It doesn't do anything. All it does is make you lose. The people in New Caledonia uh, just decided that France isn't really going to let us go anyway, so there's no point in voting. So they didn't vote. They boycotted the vote, and so thus it on paper looked like the I want to stay with France portion jumped from 52% up to like 85% because the people of New Caledonia, the actual natives, didn't vote. So, France, held that up and they literally gave a big smiley speech in like 2018 or whatever it was about like, look how happy they are. They just love France so much. They just want to stay. No, they don't. Then there was the Ottoman Empire was still around back then. Used to control all of this and all of this and all of this. But Algeria was the point where they could never actually fully get past. For all my boys there in Algeria, I know I know there is one person from Algeria who does watch me. I've heard from them once, but that was a couple years ago, so maybe they're dead. But uh, the cool kids over in Algeria were always able to manage to push them back like just enough. So they were never able to get a full sweep of the Mediterranean, but they still controlled this part. Eventually, that fell apart, and in the Allies' idiocy, they refused to give Kurdistan statehood and just divvied it up between Iran and Turkey and Iraq. Bad decision that's led to bad things since then. But this has mostly settled down to normalcy. So the major point being that the empires are predominantly gone for the most part, with France still holding on to New Caledonia and stuff. Uh, The only one that's like still around in some form is a shrunken form of Russia. So, you're kind of the one that really needs to go. And a reformed Chinese empire in the fact that they invaded Tibet in the 60s and re-annexed it. That one also needs to go. Uh, Let go of Tibet. But apart from that one, oh yeah, Italy. Well, no one cares about Italy. I forgot. I think the UK is the UK still holding on to anything? I don't think the UK is actually still really has anything on them apart from apart from Gibraltar and like a couple of the Caribbean islands. So I don't think Spain entirely cares anymore. I could be wrong, but I don't think Spain entirely cares anymore. Plus, getting Gibraltar back wouldn't really help Spain anyway. Spain's kind of dead. What did that even? Oh, yeah, that's where that jumped from. That jumped from Ethiopia. Okay, so that all jumped off from the Ethiopian thing, wanting the Ethiopian empire back, just like everybody wants their empire back now. Turkey wants the Ottoman Empire back. Azerbaijan wants Greater Azerbaijan. Russia wants the Russian Empire back. China wants Taiwan back, and eventually the rest of the Qing dynasty. Who else is doing revanchist stuff? Morocco probably won't actually do anything. But oh yeah, I forgot. Morocco is actually still an empire because they're still occupying Western Sahara. Uh, Morocco has constantly dropped hints that they want to try to reclaim the western portion of like Algeria. They would fail horrendously if they actually tried that though. But so they are doing revanchist stuff. Israel is on a revanchist binge right now. Trying to ethnically cleanse Gaza and eventually the West Bank, and probably at some point invade southern Lebanon. So they're doing the whole Greater Israel deal. And even Saudi Arabia actually has put forth things about how they want to annex like the eastern third of Yemen. So everybody is going on like imperial reclamation binging. Even Magyarország, one of the things I can't stand them for at the moment, has been going on. Orban has been waving the whole Greater Hungary flag and going on binges about the restoration of the Hungarian Empire. You know, not really something you would ever succeed at doing, Magyarország. I'm sorry, but we would crush you. So all that's going on. That was a long off ramble. Uh, uh, I mean that depends on your definition of feminist. I mean, if arresting people for being naked at a private party in like a private club is feminist, then yes, I guess that counts. I mean, if my opposition to the Iranian hijab laws is feminist, then yeah, I guess that also counts. And to the whole women can't do anything unless they have a man with them in Saudi Arabia, and rape doesn't count unless there were four male witnesses to it. That's also, something that needs to be gotten rid of. I'm assuming you're going to claim that that's feminist also. But then again, feminists would also claim that that's feminist because both of you try to either claim the thing for yourself or insist that everything is part of the enemy thing. That looks like that's it from chat. All right, were there any like questions or comments or anything from chat? or any additional super chats. I'll wait around for the 30-second or so delay, but then I have to get up and go make those cookies, as that is a long and tedious process. Making cookies like from the beginning takes a decent bit, like an hour and a half or 2 hours. So we can X that off, X that off. I might need Google Earth depending on who asks me what. And X that off. I don't know, I'll look and see if there was anything interesting that I downloaded recently that I was gonna either talk about in stream but forgot about or was gonna eventually use. Oh, well, I did get this cool picture of the refueling process in a nuclear reactor. As one of the most beautiful things ever is that lovely blue glow, especially in the stacked fuel rod arrangement. There was the OPEC reports. Was there anything else that I downloaded that was new? I guess not. It doesn't look like it. All right. Looks like nothing else. Well, thank you as well for showing up. For breaking this record. That was really surprising. 48. That is the that is 80% higher than the previous record? No, wait, the previous record was 32. So 333 basically 33 50% higher, roughly. All right, if that's it, then that will be the end of the stream, and I'll see you guys next time, which should be in the OPEC oil production levels update video, which should hopefully be up tomorrow, and then whatever else comes after that. So